Hello and welcome to Sports Chat. I'm sports editor Drew Rubenstein. I'm with Ed Owens here at the Omni Hotel in downtown Dallas, where day 2 of the Big 12 Media Days just concluded, and the Mountaineers were here today. And the thing that really kind of struck out compared to last year was just a completely different atmosphere. Last year, Geno Smith, Tavon Austin, and Dana Holgorsen kind of had huge crowds following them every step of the way, whereas today I know both of us got to speak extensively with WVU's 3 representatives one-on-one for most of the time. What was the overall reception of West Virginia? How do you think they're viewed, and how does West Virginia kind of view their place in the Big 12?
I think they view their place as being a little bit disrespected at the moment. I think they took note. They knew the crowds weren't there, especially a guy like Will Clark, who was here last year. This is his second year. He knows the difference. He knows the hype that surrounded the program coming as new Big 12 members last year, and they did make note of it. Each guy kind of said that they have a chip on their shoulder and that they use. Well, they were talking about the Big 12 poll when they were saying this, but using that as motivation where they weren't ranked as highly as they thought they should be, and I can only imagine that something like this probably fuels the same fire.
And this is the first time that we've heard from head coach Dana Holgorsen in a couple months. You were talking to him a lot. Were there any interesting kind of news and notes or anything that sticks out as we head into fall camp next week?
Outside of being asked who his starting quarterback was going to be, I think the question Dana fielded the most was about Texas Tech head coach Cliff Kingsbury, who actually played for him at Tech. And again, I think that kind of just falls in line with everybody not really knowing what to expect out of WVU this year. There's just so many questions on both sides of the ball, particularly on offense. Dana did say that priority number 1 once they get into camp is going to be figuring out their starters, but he said they're not in a rush to do it, and they're going to take their time, and when the starters separate themselves from the pack, that's when they're going to make their decisions.
Absolutely. And a couple other things I found interesting. He wants to get Pitt back on the schedule, and he kind of hinted that something sooner rather than later could actually happen. And you get the sense around here that WVU still hasn't created a rivalry within the Big 12. I don't know how long it'll actually take until that does happen, but how big is that, or I guess how important is that he's talking about adding some rivalries back to the schedule?
I think it's something that they had to do, and even when the Big East move occurred, or the Big 12 move occurred, it was always something that they said they did down the road want to do once they figured out their scheduling priorities. And I think you're right, there isn't a rival in the Big 12, at least not yet. You can't develop something like that over the course of a year. So I think fans are hungry to maybe see some more of the traditional rivalries. I don't know that Maryland really quenches that thirst for traditional rivalry. So being able to point to a date down the road and say, yeah, we're putting Pitt back on the schedule, I think that's something that'll really get the fan base excited.
Speaking of hunger, did you find out what the story was from last night with Will Clark and the steak and everything?
Will Clark did, in fact, put down a 28-ounce steak on his own. He said it's not uncommon, but yeah, they went out for a nice steak dinner as a team last night, and that was Will Clark's dinner.
Another big topic throughout both days, and especially today, was targeting in college football. This is going to be a major topic throughout the college football season. I don't think anybody's arguing with the intent of the rule, which in light of research that's coming out on concussions and the effects of hits to the head, it's obviously measures that they have to take, but it's so subjective in terms of how it's called, or at least that seems what the coaches are worried about. What was kind of the general theme from a lot of the coaches and players regarding that rule this year?
I think subjective is the right word there. It seems like there's so many different ways, and you have to make that targeting call in a split second. The officials coordinator, Walt Anderson, kind of gave a tutorial. He spoke for an hour, and at the end of it, I think there were still just as many questions as there were at the beginning. It's no fault of his, but I think that gives you an idea of just how up in the air everything is, and how many different ways you can interpret one situation. So it's going to be hard, especially in the heat of a game, to make a call that could end up costing somebody four quarters.
Could cost somebody a game, ultimately a team. And it seemed like WVU's players were talking about it, because ultimately with the new rule, you're ejected from the game if you're found guilty of targeting, and if it's in the second half, then you miss the first half of the next game. Do you think this is going to be something that everybody kind of addresses in fall camp, maybe pull out some highlights of, hey, you would be ejected in this case, or is it going to change how they actually conduct practices in fall camp?
I don't know if it'll change how they conduct practices. I think it will be a point of emphasis for the coaches and the players. Dana said that one of the things they're going to do is bring in an official to kind of point out and say, this is what you can do, this is what you can't do. And speaking to a few defensive players here over the last 2 days, it's going to change the way they play. Some of the, especially in the secondary, some of the safeties, cornerbacks, had said they are going to have to think twice before they potentially hit somebody or deliver a hit to the head, and it might change the way they react.
All right. Hey, Ed, thanks for joining us, and appreciate you joining in and tuning in to our sports video blog from Big 12 Media Days. We'll be back next week with the start of WVU Fall Camp. Thanks a lot.